and go. Yep.
So, can I just get you to state name, school setting, I mean, like year, major,
Sure.
And then what your position is today.
Sure. So I'm Ellie Bruecker. I'm a senior, and I'm majoring in political science and sociology, and I'm getting a certificate in educational policy studies. What did you want?
And position at ASM.
Oh, and I'm the chair of the Student Services Finance Committee.
So, what is your role as chair of SSFC?
So I serve as the liaison between our committee and all of the organizations that we fund, as well as the administration and the rest of ASM. So I go between chairing the meetings of SFC and communicating that information to the rest of ASM as a whole, to the non-allocable units, so rec sports and the union and UHS, and then all of the student organizations that we fund. And then I also communicate regularly with the Division of Student Life on site fee information.
And what is the primary purpose of SSFC?
Yeah, so SFC, we decide the level of segregated fees for the upcoming year. Usually it gets described as we allocate fees, but technically what we're doing is deciding for a year ahead. So we actually define the level of segregated fees that are charged to students for the upcoming year. So we make budgetary decisions on different units on campus.
So is that to say that last year you worked on this year's budget and this year you're working on next year's budget?
Yes.
Okay. So how does SSFC do all of this?
Sure. So we kind of split our duties into two parts. First, we handle the GSSF, which is the General Student Services Fund. That funds currently 15 student organizations that provide something called a direct service to campus. And I can get more into detail on that, but for those groups, they have to apply for eligibility to be in the GSSF. So we're first making eligibility decisions and seeing if groups fit a specific set of criteria. Following that, and this is all fall semester, we're making eligibility decisions. Then we make budgetary decisions for those groups. So they propose a budget and we will edit the budget and then pass it. In the spring, we hear the budgets for rec sports, Wisconsin Union, University Health Services, and CC-TAP, which is Child Care Tuition Assistance Program. So we hear all of their budgets and then we vote on those as well. We also handle any kind of like daily business with altering budgets for the current year, but other than that, we're always doing things for the year ahead.
And is majority of your work, would you say, back in the office, like crunching numbers, or is it more during the hearings and that kind of thing?
I think for most SFC members, a lot of it is not in the meeting because we are reviewing budgets and reviewing eligibility applications before the meetings. Those are some really big documents sometimes, and they're very wordy, and it requires a really thorough knowledge of the budgetary process and of our eligibility criteria. So a lot of work, probably most SFC members spend 10 to 15 hours a week working on this stuff outside of the meetings. For sure, for myself, a lot of my work is meeting with student organizations and meeting with our bigger units on campus and with administration outside of our regular SFC meetings. So a lot of my work happens outside of the meeting.
And what is the structure of SSFC?
Sure. So SFC is made up of 14 voting members and myself as chair. We have a vice chair and a secretary, and those three positions are all elected within the committee. 5 seats, let me make sure I'm going to add this correctly here. Yeah. So we have 6 seats that are elected popularly. And that happens either in fall or spring, depending when seats are open. I was popularly elected the spring before last. So in 2011. Yes, 2011 in spring I was elected. 4 seats are appointed by the nominations board out of student council. So the nominations board is created by members of student council, and they solicit for applications from the student body at large and appoint 4 students to the committee. Nope, that's 5. I always mix it up. It's 5, 5, and 4. So it's 5 students that are appointed from the at-large student body. 4 students are appointed directly from student council. So 4 members who have been elected to student council are then appointed to SFC as well. So we've got 6 popularly elected, 5 appointed from the student body, and 4 appointed from student council.
And can you explain how SSFC brings in money to its budget?
Sure. So we set the amount for the year ahead, and then that's what is charged to students. It goes along with your tuition bill. So when you look on your student center at your tuition bill, there's a section there that says segregated university fee, and it lists the number there. This year it was $555.60 for each semester, and every student has to pay that. It's right there in your tuition bill, so every student pays that, and that's where all of the seg fee money comes in.
And where does that number come from?
Sure, so we set that the year ahead. So once we have decided on all of the budgets for our units that are funded on campus, that gets added up, it gets divided by the number of students that enroll, and every student pays their share.
Can you explain more in depth what GSSF is?
Yeah. So the General Student Services Fund is a mechanism for funding the student organizations that provide what's called a direct service to campus. So a direct service is something that is educational but not credit producing. It's accessible to all students, it's requestable by all students, and is tailorable to a student's needs and available throughout the fiscal year. So groups that are funded through the GSSF are required to provide something that any student at any time can come and say, I need this service in this kind of way to fit my needs, and they need to be able to provide that. So we have 15 student organizations currently providing those services for students and student orgs on campus, and they get more expansive budgets. They usually have several staff members that are paid on salary, and then we fund any things that they need to put on the direct services, as well as events for their organization too.
And is it possible to get like a rough number of an average of what they get, or is
Yeah.
it?
So most groups get the range is somewhere between $35,000 and $200,000 for most of those student organizations. The total GSSF budget, when you add all of them together, ends up somewhere between $1 million and $1.2 million, usually.
And what is the number of, how much do you get, what was the budget total this year for everything that you got from student segregated fees?
The total, well, it would be, I only know what it is for each individual student. I try to think of it that way, because I think when we make our decisions, we're trying to keep in mind how much each individual student is going to pay, not the grand total that we bring in, but the grand total was $555.60 multiplied by however many students are on campus this year.
Does that include graduate students as well?
Yes, grad students pay seg fees.
Can you give examples of how SSFC has affected students in recent years?
Yeah, so I would argue that SFC affects campus every year. Every year we're asking students to pay this amount of money, and we're also bringing a lot of really cool things to campus. So SFC, through segregated fees, we fund your ability to go to the Union and have a burger or sit on the terrace. We fund your ability to go to rec sports, to go to the surf or to go to the NAT, or to use UHS and get a flu shot. We also fund some student organizations that provide things from anywhere from tutoring services to safer sex programs to like cultural related trainings to, gosh, they provide everything, like lobbying trainings. So we've got like 15 very different student organizations providing very different services to campus. It also funds kind of with those student orgs, it funds a broader form of speech on campus. So you've got groups with very different viewpoints talking about things on campus, and I think that that's really important on a campus as large as ours is, to have that public forum of speech that's funded by students.
How does ASM use its personal funds?
Sure.
And
so,
what are those funds?
Yeah. So ASM has an internal budget around $1 million. Several $100,000 of that also goes to student organizations in the form of operations, events, and travel grants. So most student organizations that get funding through segregated fees get smaller, like little lump sums of money to provide a particular event, or for office supplies, or for traveling to some convention or conference or something. The rest of the stuff that's in the ASM internal budget pays for things like all our office supplies, everything we need to do our daily business. It pays for all of our salaried staff, our professional staff. It pays for all of the leadership roles that are paid. It also pays for us to get some training to do our jobs better. Funds quite a few things, but basically just so we can make sure that we are able to do the jobs we need to do to fund these things and get them on campus.
When you're talking about smaller events, you mean that part of that ASM internal budget is then also you would come to SSFC and request money for a small event?
It doesn't come through SFC, it comes through a student council. Underneath it has a finance committee, which is confusing sometimes. So Student Services Finance Committee, which is a separate branch, and then Finance Committee is under Student Council, and that funds those student organizations out of the grant budgets within the internal budget. So they do a whole different process and just get, whereas one group in the GSSF might get funding for several events through their budget, these groups get funding for one specific event.
In your personal experience and opinion, how has ASM as a whole most affected students?
ASM, I think, has struggled to be relevant to students sometimes. I think students don't really know what ASM is, and that's so frustrating to me because you've got 50 students in there working really, really hard to make sure that these kind of things happen on campus. ASM runs campaigns. We've run a campaign, I think 10 years ago, we got College Library to stay open 24 hours. I believe that was something we did. We got the study day, so that there's the day between when classes end and when finals start. But currently, I think like the stuff that we're working on with registering students to vote, we're starting a mental health campaign to try to improve mental health services and awareness on campus. I think ASM as a whole runs a lot of really cool campaigns, but aside from that, this money that you're spending is ASM ensuring that these vital services to campus are provided and are on campus. And I think that's something that I didn't know about before I got involved in ASM. I had no idea I didn't even know what seg fees were. I saw it on my tuition bill, but I figured that was just part of tuition. And I think that without ASM, students wouldn't have the right to decide what is vital on campus. So I think that that's really important.
If you could change something about ASM, just solely you, what would you change?
I would like to see ASM be more well-known on campus. I would like to see every student on campus be able to tell you what ASM is and something that it does that has positively impacted their life. I would like to see ASM focus more on making it known what we provide instead of just seeing in the papers that we're all up fighting in student council. I think people this year are really dedicated to being more productive and focusing on being more service-oriented than in the politics of it. So I would definitely change the focus from politics to providing things on campus. And that's my personal focus, and it always has been in SFC, but I would like to see the whole organization kind of move to that view, and I really think that we will soon.
What do you think is the biggest flaw of ASM or SSFC, and not from the PR perspective that you've been talking about?
Sure. I think the biggest flaw with SSFC is that we don't currently have the kind of power that we need and deserve over our segregated fees. Some of the units on campus get funded whether we say they can or not. And that's not right, and it's, I don't think, legal. I think that the biggest flaw right now is in our inability to get that kind of power back. And I think it's something that we're going to work on. But right now there are budgets that we only have a yes or no vote. We don't have the ability to say, well, this line in your budget is not okay. And that's unfortunate. And I think that that's a really big flaw.
Last year there was, of course, the turmoil with MSFC?
MCSC?
MCSC, yes. So many abbreviations today.
Lots of abbreviations.
And the chancellor was able to overturn a decision. Now, how much power does the chancellor have over SSFC, the budget in general?
Yeah. So there were a few things that happened last year where the chancellor disregarded a decision by SFC. He has the ability, so state statute says that students in consultation with the chancellor shall determine the segregated fees. So in that sense, he does have the ability to come in and say, hey, I'm not so sure about this. Unfortunately, the shall in consultation with the chancellor has been taken to be the chancellor can override us. I don't think that that is the correct interpretation. Like I said, there were several instances where that happened. And right now we're working on figuring out what the correct interpretation is of that, whether he does have the ability to do that, but I don't think that he does. So it's students' money and it should be students' decision.
Is there anything else you think that you should tell me or that I should focus on?
Sure. I would just say I would really love for more students to be able to use the services that, especially that our funded student orgs provide. So I would really encourage students to look on the ASM website for what those student orgs are and get in touch with them. If you have a student org on working class issues, we have a student org that's funded through segregated fees that provides that. We have student orgs that work on sexual assault and domestic violence and stalking on campus. We've kind of got a bit of everything. So I would really love for students to be more aware of the kind of things that are accessible to them and to really use them and get the most out of their segregated fees and to ask questions if they have them.
Do you have any opinions on how ASM, SSFC should get that message out better?
Yeah, so I held a direct services demo night a few weeks ago where the GSFs came in, some of them came in and provided their direct services to students. I didn't do the best job advertising it. I should have advertised it a lot better to the student body at large. But I would like to keep doing things like that every once in a while and kind of have them, because it gives them a chance to kind of do some live advertising to students. And I think we just need to market that to students better. Get them to come.
All right.
Cool.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.